systems and multi-certified professional also. It's got a CISSP, CISM, C-Risk, MVP, MBI, VIP, whatever. It's got all those. And in between, speaking, teaching, because he's also an instructor, and also the CIO, the CISO of his company, he also writes, and he has written hundreds of articles. I think he has written a lot of books also as far as IT security and Microsoft operating systems. So he's definitely an expert in his field. And before, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jay Ferron.
Thank you, Okay, let me tell you what we're going to do, how I'm going to do it, and where we're going to go. I'm going to talk to you about stuff that's free. For 90% of this, you have it, you don't even know you have it. Or you have it, you didn't know it was there to use. So the topic is access control, so 1990s. I'm going to be blunt and I'm going to ask you a question. You spend all the due diligence. You set up access controls, you set up roles, you set up all the stuff so he can't save a file anywhere, right? And what does he do? He downloads it from the share over here and he puts it over there. What do we have to protect that? That's what I'm going to talk about right now. By the way, everything I'm going to talk about right now comes in the box with Server 2012. Okay? If you have a Windows 8 machine and a Windows 10 machine, you can leverage some other stuff as well. This has been around, most of this stuff, since Server 2008. How come Microsoft never told me it was there? Was the question. This is really funny to say. I've said to people at Microsoft, what about this? And they say, we don't have anything like that. And I go, yeah, you do. And they go, really? It's in the operating system? Uh-huh. Well, can you show me how to do it? Oh my God, I didn't know it was there. Because they had so much at times that you never get a chance to experience it. So let me kind of give you a feel for here. By the way, all the presentations, I'm the program chair, so I made sure of this. On your schedule, on the bottom of your schedule, that's where you can download every presentation that's being offered today. And with the exception of one presentation, they're all being videotaped. So you can go back afterwards. It'll be on your evaluations that you'll get an email on, so you can watch the ones, wait a minute, I needed to be at this session, this session, this session, this session at the same time. So that's kind of the mindset. So let's look at the problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a service called FRSM, File Resource Service Management. File classifications, what are files? Then I'm going to talk about discretionary access controls, something that's built into Windows. And then RMS, and if we have time, we'll do a demo. So, file classification is how do we classify what data is? I'm going to give you the big picture right here so you can kind of get to know where I am. I know Bill is the senior manager, and he wants to make sure that no one can get to the data in finance except for finance people. Doesn't that sound great? Beth wants to do the same thing. Well, with FSRM and classifications, we can do the following thing. First thing, I want to make sure that only the people in the finance OU can touch finance data and can only save it to the finance data directorate. And if you're not part of the finance OU, you don't get to, oh, wait a minute. He's an admin. He doesn't even get to touch it. Wait a minute. I just said that right. The admin doesn't get to touch the data. Now, if the admin puts himself in that group, guess what happens to the audit file? Wait. Now, so Billy Bob says, but Bill, I need to look at your stuff. Okay? Here's the cool part about this. When Bill clicks on the share, it says, I'm sorry, you don't have access to this. Would you like to request access? And then when it sends the message, Bill wants access to this, it says, Bill's trying to get to this share to do this. Will you grant them yes or no? Wow, isn't that kind of a cool idea? Think about this. Now, for those of you who know me, I do have a little bit of a dark side. I'm an ethical hacker. For those of you who don't know me, I have a really dark side. I'm very much of an ethical hacker. I can break into a network, but if I don't have permissions to the finance folder, I can't get to it, even if I'm on your network. Think about protecting the data inside your organization with permissions and roles. and then leveraging this on top of it. That's what we're really talking about here. So, now that you have the feel for it, let me give you a feel. So, FSRM, or File System Resource Management, allows me to classify data. The way we think about security today, the way that most of us think about security today, is an onion. And we protect the outside of the building first, and data is last. Am I wrong there?
Yeah.
Okay? Shouldn't we be thinking about the data first, and then protecting it all the way out? This lets you start focusing on where the data is. Okay? So we're going to look at the data. We're going to look at what the data is. How do we manage the data? Oh, by the way, we can do quotas on data. We can look at screening data. Ooh, wouldn't this be interesting? Hey, Beth, would it be okay if I started screening for any document, any data that has PII information and classified it automatically? I'm doing a customer right now. They have 60 terabytes of data, and the PII information is everywhere. And they have no clue what it is. And they've hired 130 people to go through file shares looking for PII data. I said, gee, this is going to be a really boring job. And then I showed him that this was available, and the guy said, oh, okay, never mind. And now what's happening is they're just reading the reports to get it, okay? By the way, one other piece here that's one of my favorites. When was the last time we deleted old files? We just buy more storage, right? Is there anyone who's a storage vendor in the room? Because that's what we do. We just buy more and more storage. Would it be nice if, perhaps, we could run a command that said, find me all files that are 460 days old and list them or move them to an archive format? Wait a minute, I'm going to take this one step further. Let me find all files that have SID unknown. Okay, for those of you who don't understand what I meant by SID unknown, that means the user isn't there anymore. We've deleted the user, but the data still sits somewhere. Now, I'm not going to say that any of us have companies where we've gotten rid of people and we haven't gotten rid of their data, or we don't even know where the data was because they put it everywhere in the world. Because how many of us have the personal share, and then we have the other folder where we're running out of space where we put stuff? Right? How do we figure that out? So this stuff does that. It'll also give us storage reports. What they added in 2012 is discretionary access control. And we can make our own classifications on what we're looking for. So if you say, well, I'm interested in ID numbers that are 327, not 324, thinking like social security number, guess what? You can do that. And then, this is where it gets really cool, assistance denied, so when somebody says, well, I'm not granted, it'll actually prompt them, and you can customize the prompt so that it sends it. And then here's really cool. How many of us believe that the data owner, not IT, should approve permission to the directory where it is? You can have the system send a message to you saying, you data owner, this person wants to do it. And then you can forward it to IT saying, please grant permission for this person. It's about time that something like this was around. The other thing that it allows us to do is to say, go search for this kind of data, and when you do it, automatically classify it this way. And one of the attributes that you can put in the file information, the metadata, is this is HIPAA data, this is SOX data, this is this data. And then you can say to the system, when you find data like this, do the following thing to it. That's kind of where we're going with this discussion. Oh yeah, this has been around since 2008, no one told me. Okay, so file classification, here it is. I've got something called payroll, it's an Excel file. I want to make this IS confidential. Click, point, thank you very much. It's a property rule that we add to it. We can add classifications of yes, no, date, time, numbers. We can do choices. We can do ordering. We can do strings. We can do multiple strings. So we can look, if it has a driver's license and a date of birth, then do this. If it has this and this, then do that. We can classify it. And then if we want, we can automatically move it. So we can actually move the data. We can also encrypt it on the fly. So a rule is based on the information about the file. You build a scope of what you want. You build the property, have how you want to assign it. You add whatever other classifications you want. This is corporate data that has to live for 7 years. After 7 years, we don't need it anymore. So you can actually put that information in the metadata, so 7 years from now, it gets archived or it gets wasted. Okay? How many of us have had data that just sits there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever? I'm a story guy for those of you who don't know me, so I want to give you a little story here that'll kind of help you. There's this company called Micro something. I can't remember the name of it. Oh yeah, Microsoft. Anyone remember about 2005? European Union slapped their hands and said you're being bad guys because you want to be monopolistic about Internet Explorer and browsers. There's a pre-story to that, which is back in 1995. Bill Gates sent out an email to all the employees saying, we're not an internet player. We should be a dominant player on the internet. Guess what the European Union used against Microsoft? That email in 1995. Oh, wait a minute, in 1995, Microsoft had a browser that didn't really even work, okay? Now at Microsoft, guess what? Emails that are more than 6 months old that aren't required by regulatory requirements are thrown out. I'm going to ask you a question. Just think about this for your company. Somebody sues about sexual harassment. How far back in email do you want them going for every employee in the company? If the policy was after 6 months, it's gone. That's our policy. We can give you 6 months view. That's all we can give you. So there are reasons why you might want to put rules on certain kinds of data to make it easier for you long term. Okay? Okay, now, so classification is how do we classify it, what do we do with the movement of that property, and then how do we deal with it. Now, let me be blunt. If I make a rule that says if this is HIPAA and this is SOX, SOX goes here, HIPAA goes here, if I have a document that's HIPAA and SOX at the same time, the system's not going to be smart enough to go, okay, which way do you want me to send the document? It doesn't know that. So you do have to think a little bit of process here. By the way, because I know I'm not going to get through all of this today, on my blog, which is on my front page, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to put some blogs up of step-by-step exactly how to implement this with screenshots. Click here, click here, click here, click here, click here as a demo. Okay? So, we can also do this for storage reports. I want to find duplicate files. I want to screen my files. I want to find files by an owner who doesn't exist anymore. I want to find files by property. I want to find files by large files, files that haven't been used, or look at quotas. This is easy stuff to do. We don't do it. We just keep buying more and more storage, which means we have to buy more and more backup. Okay? We can schedule a task so that, guess what? Every Friday night it runs this task for us. We can do it all the time, but there are certain things you do once in a while. Hey, I'm going to do this. Let's go look at this server. Let's go look at this group. Let's go look at this group. Now, what's nice about this is not only can you use the graphical user interface, you can also, for those of you who understand what PowerShell is, and PowerShell is a command line scripting language from Microsoft. For those of you who are admins, if you're not using PowerShell, shame, shame, shame on you. And let me give you what PowerShell does in a 12-second statement. PowerShell, you say, I want to get an object. I want to get information about services or whatever, or users. The result, though, is an object. So I can do a get Active Directory users who haven't logged in 30 days and disable the account. I just said the entire command. Find all users who haven't logged in ever. Somebody created the account. No one's logged in, which means that the typical script, find users who haven't logged in 30 days, doesn't work. But it's an account that's been there forever. And then I can say, send that out to an Excel spreadsheet. So all of these things I can use PowerShell to do as well. Now, currently, our problem is we have NTFS permissions. So we say, this person can read, this person can write, this person can modify. But if they take the file from one place and put it somewhere else, it all falls apart. So if, let me see, somebody who's at the NSA who got arrested today, if you haven't heard about that, okay, stealing information, wanted to copy it from one secret area to somewhere else, there's nothing blocking them from doing that. Guess what? With this, I can actually lock you into your own environment. NTFS doesn't give us that permission. It doesn't give us the capability to add a condition on top of a permission. And that's really what we're talking about. So discretionary access controls, one, we get central management. We can audit for compliance. So this is really good. Go here, the audit's on. Show me who's changed, who's granted permissions, what they've done to a file, and why they've done it to the file. And it'll track all of that stuff. I can protect the sensitive information that I declare to be sensitive for my organization. Yeah, let me guess. Credit card numbers are going to be sensitive for everybody, okay? But maybe I don't have credit card numbers. Maybe I'm a drug company and I'm interested in what researchers are doing because they're going to replace the next Viagra with something else. Think that Pfizer's really interested in the security about that stuff? Okay? Oh, wait a minute. What about an employee who's going to leave your company who wants to take all the customer names out of the database and email it to themselves? So you can start protecting those kind of things using this. Okay, so the way that this works is we use claims. This is the same type of claim solution that we used years ago for federated services. So what we can do is we can have a claim for a user, but we can also have a claim for a device. And what makes this so powerful is that Jeff is in finance. Jeff's computer can use the finance condition. But when Jeff is sitting at George's computer doesn't have that access. So Jeff can't access the data unless he's sitting at the computer we want him to be sitting at the time we want him to be sitting at, and then he can access that data.
Where incidentally he has supervision.
Exactly. So all of a sudden, we've added control not just to the person, but to the object that they're either using or applying to that object. And you can do this across forests. So organization to organization, you can apply this permission. Okay? Now, I'm going to jump through a couple of slides here because I've done them a lot. Okay? So resource properties are those things that we want to do. So for example, here I've got a file server, and Alice is in a group, and she's got permission. Well, guess what? When the user goes to log in, by default, they get a Kerberos ticket. That's the way that Windows works today. Well, now what we can do is we can apply in the domain controller a discretionary access rule that says, even though they have a ticket, does the ticket meet the discretionary access control rule? If the answer is no, they're not valid. Once they meet the requirement, then we'll give them the permission to do what they're wanting to do. Okay? So here we get the claim type of what they want, what do they want to do, and then the Kerberos ticket says, okay, now that you've met my criteria, I will then pass your credentials onto the system. This is very, very powerful stuff. Okay? So DAX, if you have a Windows 8 machine or a Windows 10 machine, absolutely built in there. Windows 7 does not support this yet. Okay? The discretionary access controls. Okay? The DC issues the groups and the claims. It enumerates it, and then the token adds this extra component on top of it. This does not require a lot of work to do. Windows 8, Windows 10. And I will tell you, for people who say, well, but I'm not going to Windows 10 yet, I will give you a scary statement. Department of Defense has mandated by the end of the year that all computers are Windows 10. And anybody who's ever worked for DoD knows they are the slowest organization in the world to go to newer technologies. They've gotten it, and they're using it this way. Say what? Okay. So we need Server 2012. We need the file system resource management. We need a domain controller with at least one Windows 2012 DC. Okay? And then we set up group policies for what are the rules that we want it to do. We go into the ADAC system in Active Directory. We configure certificates. Those certificates can be used with the same certificate server you're using for everything else. And then we set the attributes for what's the permissions for the computers, the users. We can even leverage time. So I'll give you an example. I have a customer right now. We just rolled this out to. They're a bank. The employees as tellers can only access data when they're sitting at the branch. If they go for training, they cannot access the real production data. Ever. And guess what? Developers can never touch production data at all. They can only touch development data. They can't touch production data, ever.
Can you set a condition that says during a period of time?
Oh yeah, and by the way, the tellers can only do it from 9 in the morning till 6 at night. That's it. And from their desk, that's it. Thank you very much. You're not there, you can't win. Now what they did do is they made a group, because the tellers move from branch to branch to branch, so they made a group for the tellers, so whatever branch they're in, they get it, but then the condition was on the branch, they could only see the accounts for that branch.
Question on the time. Is the time moved according to their time zone that they're in?
Yes.
So
Yes.
It's software, guys.
Yeah, but by the way, this is a good statement for you guys to know. Please make sure that all your computers are linked to a same time standard. Because then this is a good audit trick for you guys. If your Windows computers are more than 15 minutes apart, they do not synchronize properly. If you have a domain controller that's not getting group policies, it's because they're more than 15 minutes apart. It's one of those things you don't know. It's also really important if you're going to do forensics. It's really bad when the firewall got the attack before the router got the attack. I want to know how that happened.
Jay,
Yes.
but then you're saying NTFS is not the NTP is not working properly within your domain or forest.
Oh, well, but guess what? There are people who don't point to an NTP server.
Don't tell me that.
Okay.
I'm telling you that.
You're always telling me things I don't want to know.
Okay, well, sorry, Bill. Okay, so we create a list of what we want to protect. You don't have to protect everything. Start off with the small stuff. By the way, the resource properties are disabled. You have to enable them, and then you say what you want to do. And I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. The rule contains criteria. It can be 1 criteria or it could be 40 criteria. So watch this. If you're in a teller, if you're in a bank's teller OU, if you're working between these hours, if you want to touch this data, we'll let you. And as soon as you get one of those no's, you get a pop-up on the screen saying, click here, you've not been given permission to this. Okay? You create the rule, you create the description, you create permissions. By default, this is really bizarre, you actually go into the system and remove administrator from the folder. Isn't that nice? Okay? Now, when the administrator wants to add himself, guess what happens? It shows up in the log file. But here's the best part about the log file. The log file gets sent to somebody or a group of people. So as soon as somebody gets in, oh, you're the data owner? Why are you in my folder? Now, let me be blunt. If I'm a nasty administrator, I can do whatever I want. But guess what? This is kind of putting a slap on the hands and saying we're watching you. And most admins, and I'm an IT guy, don't want to be in there, but by default, they've been there all along. So this reduces the risk for me getting into your stuff. Okay? So here's an example. I have a user who claims they're in finance. We're going to set a clearance of high. The device is in finance. We're going to say it's managed, it's true. And if the resource and the 2 match, so these 3 match, then and only then they get access to that folder. We've never been able to do that. Well, we have been able to do it since 2008, but no one's known that this has been there to do that. This is pretty cool stuff. Okay, so we manage the policies, we set them up, and then we use group policies to synchronize them across our domains and across our forests. Really nice thing to do. This is what ends up happening. Inside the properties of your device, or your files, you get underneath the classifications, there's a new tab where you can start classifying what it is. Now, I'm going to give you the caveat of caveats of this. You need to sit down with the business, with IT, with security, and decide what are the classifications your organization is going to use. This is not an IT decision. This is a business decision. And let me be blunt. There's not finance for finance, finance for sales, finance for whatever, because it doesn't have to be that way. If I make a category called finance, If you're in the group of sales, you get to see the sales information finance, but you don't get to see the finance information from accounting. So I can use the same classification, but based on your group, you get to see what you get and what you don't get. This is an exercise that I see people go down the dirty road and they don't spend the time with the businesses to get the business to agree on. It was actually with an organization, this sounds really bizarre, they had 197 classifications for data.
Sorry.
Okay, and my statement was, can you tell me the difference between a 101 and a 102? And the user said, I don't know, so I always pick 101. Okay, it sounds silly. So you want to make this something that everybody can understand and remember. Once again, once I make the classification, once I make the rule, I can say, go to the server, find all this stuff, and classify it for me. You don't have to manually touch each file. Yes?
Can you specify that a certain user gets, if you don't specify a classification, they automatically get classification at the highest level?
Watch this. You can say that a user can't save a file without a classification. Yes? Don't keep getting prompted. What's the classification?
It doesn't verify that what's in the document is the proper classification.
Well, but you can run your engine against it to verify it.
Okay.
So you can say, once a week, I'm going to go to this file server and go look at finance to make sure that anything that's got PII information or social security number on it, I want classified this way. And if it doesn't see it, it'll add it there. You can have, in this case, I've got two. I have an impact and PII. By the way, the PII definitions are already in the system. So you don't have to spend the time building them. Now, if you're going to do this for India, yes. Okay? Or if you're strange ways. Now, so you decide the resources that you want to protect. You figure out what policies you want. You transfer the policies, paper. I know this is radical. I know we're IT, but we make a paper process and then we implement technology on top of it. The auditors are going, yes. The IT guys are going, no, it's easy to do it in technology. Okay? And then we put the attributes for filtering. So here's exactly what happens. I have a share. The share has a description. But the share description then looks at the central access policy reference guide. It sees what the rules are here, and then it applies the NTFS permissions on top of it. So we're leveraging these rules on this file share. So even though the file share says universal, guess what? Only the people who have access to that specific rule set can get to that data. Okay? Now, inside of this, we can also monitor and test this before we deploy it. Microsoft was really good about this part of the problem. They gave you a way to test it before you actually deploy it and said, oh my God, I just messed up 4 terabytes worth of documents. So you can stage it. And when you do this, you get a staging event. So here I've got a security of Alice, her account name, the object, what the file was. Here's the rules. By the way, this is kind of what the help desk sees. Here's the rules. They were granted read control by ownership, only read control, okay? And guess what? There's a difference because it was not granted because this had HBI information. So even though she had file access, she didn't have the central rule permission. We can identify where there's a conflict. This was the hard part. How do you identify the conflict? Well, and this is where it gets kind of stupid. How many of you have actually seen a file folder where users have full control? Oh my God, please, no. Full control, for those of you who don't understand that, means that a user can give other people access to the folder and remove the administrator. Bad, bad, bad. But you know what? The IT guy said, well, the share isn't working, I'll just give them full control. Then they can use whatever they want to do. And for those of you shaking your head going, no, this doesn't happen. Yes, it happens regularly. Okay. So, when a user clicks on a file, okay, they get it. You set up the troubleshooting message you want and who you want to get it to. You specify the email owner for the share. I'm putting your address down, not the help desk, yours, because you're the one who owns the data. Don't you want to approve who it is? So the user or the person who owns the process, and it could be multiple names, who owns that data folder, gets the email saying somebody wants to join. Then you can say to IT, please grant permission to this individual to do it. Okay? So all of this happens, you can build a US, and then once again you can approve and forward as a workflow to the IT admins to give permission. Okay? So you define what the message is, you define whether or not they should be able to ask for requests for assistance. You can determine the recipients of the email, and you can configure the target operating systems. Group policy to do this. Now let's take it to the next step. So I've got my folder. Ken's got his information in the folder. It's all finance. What can we do to protect it further? Wouldn't it be nice if we could encrypt the data on the fly so that when the data was sitting on storage, it was encrypted? Oh, wait a minute. I don't want the users to do it. I want the system to do it. And any user who's in the finance group, when they open up the file, decrypts it. When they save it, it's automatically encrypted. Now we can leverage rights management services, which is the Microsoft RMS. It's right management. It's been around for a long time. It goes back to Office 95. Okay, so way back when. It's not new stuff. You can leverage, if you want, using Azure's rights management service, or you can do it on-prem. The advantage of the Azure service is that if you want to share that file with another organization, the file is protected in transit, and they still can open up the file to the person that you've sent it to. So here's what happens. We have a rights management service. You can do it hybrid, where you have a server in your building and nowhere else. You can have a server in your building, one in the cloud. You can have it all in the cloud. You can decide which way you want to do it. The documents, by the way, this will work in SharePoint, it'll work in Exchange, and it'll work on all sorts of documents, not just Microsoft Office. You can write protect, watch this, an AutoCAD drawing. Okay? Then you can also classify the data and say automatic encryption. So all my SOX data, by default, will be encrypted when it's sitting on the storage array. Somebody breaks into the network, they change their username to administrator. They're still not going to be able to read the data if they don't have the RMS permissions. Let me be blunt. If somebody can get into your network, change to administrator, and grant themselves permission to this folder, grant themselves permission to the RMS key, and your audit system and your SIM hasn't figured that out, then no one's paying attention to security at all inside your organization. Okay? Then we get more security all the way through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out of the deck for a second and just show you some of this stuff, because I think it's kind of fun to show you this stuff. And the deck's there so you can look at it. So what I have here is I have two servers that I'm going to connect to. And I have a domain controller. Okay, good. That'll come up. Okay, so here's my DC. I'm just going to go to Tools and show you a couple of things here. I'm going to go to Active Directory Administrative Assistant. This is the domain controller. This is the admin center. By the way, this is a PowerShell site with a graphical user interface on it. That's really what this is, okay? And look under Discretionary Access Control. This is where I put my DACs. So here I have central access policies, central access rules, claim types, property types, etc. So if I look at my access policies, here I've got a policy for accessing confidentiality. And then I can choose who I want to give permission to these files to. This can be a user. Let me be blunt, it should be a group. You don't apply permissions to users, you apply them to group. So all I have to do here is say add the resource department. I'm going to use that as an example and say OK. And then I can come down here and I can look at the attributes I want to give them. This is pretty fast and easy from a graphical user interface. Now, just to jump this back for a second, if I look at a resource property, okay, here's the properties. These are the defaults that you have. Company, confidential, department, discoverable, yes or no. Hello, mouse. Folder usage, impact, intellectual property, private use, PII information, protect, protected health insurance, requires clearance, retention period. How long am I going to keep that record for? This is all built in. You don't have to spend hours doing this. So if I want a retention period, what do I want it to be? Okay? Now, let me show you on the server side exactly the other component of this that matches this up. So here I'm going to go to the File Services Resource Management. It's an add-on, it's a role and feature that you put in Windows. I just clicked on this, and now I can look at quota manage, so I can look at my quotas. File screening, okay? Here's the templates, watch this. Block audiovisual, block email, block extensions, block images, monitor files. I can configure what I want to grant permission to on whatever share, okay? I can choose the group of what it is. Here's storage management, but here's classification, and this is kind of cool. So watch this. What do you call it? If confidentiality, for example, here it is, confidentiality, yes or no, and then here's the values that I'm setting. Is this high confidential, moderate confidential, or low confidential? Your rules, you pick what the rules are that you want to it. Then I can take that and I can apply the rules. So for example, let's do this confidential payroll doc file. I'm going to edit this rule. So this rule says I'm going to look at when the word payroll is in a file. The scope, I'm looking at this directory or whatever directories it wants. What classification do I want to give it? Yes, no. And then how do I want to evaluate this? And I can say evaluate it, or I can say clear it out and start again. So you have a way to over and over and over again customize this to the level of security that you want it to be for your organization. This is not a do it once and oh my God, I'm hurt. So if you decide down the road that confidentiality doesn't work for you, but you want 4 other ways to do it, guess what? You've got whichever way you want to do it. Okay? By the way, you can aggregate the information so I can have multiple rules. Now, here's corporate data. Okay? Here's where the scope is. I'm only looking at user files in this directory on the E drive. How do I want to classify it? I can do a folder classification, I can do a content classification, I can do a PowerShell so I can customize it to whatever I'm looking for. And then how am I going to evaluate this? I'm going to evaluate the existing properties. So I'm going back to say, okay, let's look at all these documents. They don't have anything. Let's go back and look at them. Okay, wait a minute. We found these documents. We really weren't caring about this. Oh, wait a minute. We're now doing business over here. We have to care about it over here. And we can go back and say, okay. So does that make sense to everybody? Now, it gets even better. Look at the bottom of the page. Here's the schedule, when we're going to do it, whether it's processing, the next time till I run that process. I can do exactly the same thing for file management. I love this one. Find old expired documents and move them to an archive folder. Hello, it's about time. What's the scope? Where am I doing it? What's the action I want to do? Here's the directory I'm going to put it in. Who do I notify days before an email? I can generate a report of the log, the errors, the audit log file. I have all this to do, and I can schedule this so that Sue gets every week, here's the report of the files that haven't been touched in 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years. I can set the condition. This one's saying if it's confidential and it hasn't been used in X, move it. If it's financial and it should only be saved for 7 years, I'm going to make the rule up that says if I have a financial record that's confidential, that hasn't been touched in 7 years, move it to archive. Now here's the cool part about this, and I want to kind of hit this as the last message. I know I'm kind of rushing this. How many of you today can tell me where all your confidential data is on your server? How old it is, whether or not you should store it, and who's got access to it. I just ran this report, and guess what? I know where it is, the last time it was touched, who owns it, where it is, and I did it across my enterprise. This is free stuff. This is cool stuff. And with that, I'll take questions. Yes, sir.
So, somebody gets on your network, they do an NT authentication for the admin, they're getting the NT hash and trying to get around. Is there any equivalent that you have to be worried about with these keys?
So there's a couple of things here. First, once again, the admin, by default, you remove from this folder, so it doesn't happen.
Well, they could get the head of finance.
Well, okay, bear with me. I agree with that. But he's got to get the head of finance at the head of finance's computer. Oh, wait a minute. Remember now, it's not, I'll give you my password, but if you ain't sitting on this computer, you can't do anything.
But he just clicked on my fish, he or she just clicked on my phishing link.
Well, but you follow where I'm going.
Right.
So, first of all, that's a problem there. The second thing is, and I'll just hit this really fast, one of the features of Windows 10 that a lot of people don't know is there's something called Credential Guard. What that is it randomizes the hash and it takes the LASS.exe system and makes it virtualized. So stealing the hash is almost a physical impossibility now, okay? The reality is, this isn't gonna stop every thief in the world. Let me be blunt. Are you gonna give me your password?
No, sir.
It's a 45. Bam! Are you gonna give me your password?
Still no, sir.
Okay, how many people after the first shot are giving me, or after the guns at their head is giving me the password?
I would have given it to you for a buck.
You know, Buck, here it is, have a nice day, please leave me alone. So the reality is, does this solve everything? The answer is no. But guess what? I've got an audit trail, I've got permissions, I've got DACs. Guess what? I make the analogy in security, and this is probably the best security analogy I make it all the time. I walk to your house, you have a 6-foot fence. I walk to your house, you have a 6-foot fence with a 90-pound Rottweiler. I go to her house, her husband's got a sign on the outside door saying, I like the NRA, step on my property, I'm gonna shoot you. I go to his house, screen door, open, no car. Which place am I hacking? Okay? What this does is, compared to all the rest of the people around you, this takes you to that next level of security that realistically is something you want. Now, what's nice about this is all of those audit reports, all of those permissions, you can put in your SIM. So if somebody's watching the SIM and looking for this, all of a sudden they're gonna go, wait a minute, how come somebody, and wait a minute, oh, by the way, the finance guy can't touch the finance guy stuff after 5 o'clock at night. So why are you trying to access something at 5 at night? Why is it sending an alert at 5 o'clock at night? Why aren't you doing it from your own computer? All of those whys help you. The average hack today, the average penetration, they're inside your organization for up to 9 months before you catch it. If you're implementing technology like this, people who are hitting the critical data that you've classified, you should be able to find out within minutes that somebody's touching something. That to me is really
It's
good.
great to get context like this.
Okay? Any other questions or thoughts?
This looks like a bullseye to me, where the data is that high and concentrically it can be protected from going out,
Right.
or enhanced from anybody coming outside in. Are companies looking at just data classification by piece, but not by the relationship of data together?
Now you've talked about the first stage is classification, the next page is how do they interact with each other. Okay? I'm going to be blunt about it. You know, there's data at rest, data at use, and data in motion. Can we protect all three of the answers? Yes. But how many of you have systems today where the data comes out of this system, it's got a hash on it, when it goes to this system, you validate the hash to make sure the data that left this system is the same as this system. We got to get our developers to start thinking this way. This is early 101 stuff, but guess what? It's stuff that's going to help us. This is, I'll call this is a giant leap, but it's not the only leap. And there's more coming.
Okay.
And with that, I thank you all very much.